And welcome everybody. I'm very excited to talk about the new BCC 11, and specifically, again, for the most part in this webinar, we're going to be talking about keying. I always joke that there's two things that editors hate doing the most, and that's motion tracking and keying. Especially Media Composer editors. As Media Composer editors, we're very accustomed to just staying and doing a lot of our effects work inside of the interface. We don't normally like to jump out to After Effects a lot. And with this new Primat Studio tool that we have at our disposal, it's really going to take all the keys you do and the time that it takes to do them really, a lot shorter to get them done, and it's going to take the quality of them really to the next level. And what I've tried to do is to come up with some real world examples. Now, I jokingly say real world examples, but each of these examples that I'm going to show you, and we're going to go through really four main examples of Primat. They're really going to focus on a specific aspect of keying. In really the first setup, we're going to talk about the key itself, and then I'm going to talk about other things like light wrap. We're going to talk about creating garbage mats. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of different other things. So I don't want to, ramble on too long. I just really want to just get in and get started. Now, I want to talk a little bit about where we came from before BCC 11. One thing you're going to notice with sort of the trend with BCC, as much as it is an effects package, it's really a toolkit. It's really the kit that you open and say, okay, I've got to do some rotoscoping. Boom, there's my pixel chooser. I got to do some keying. Boom, there's my Primat Studio. I need to do, flicker fixer removal. Okay, boom, there they all are. And these tools really are sort of getting, I'm not going to say exponentially better, but we're getting, different tools with each release that just really focuses on a specific aspect of what we do. In the last version, it was Mocha, really for getting in and tailoring effects exactly the way that we need it. In this release, it's Primat Studio. Now, where we came from is from another effect called, appropriately enough, Chroma Key Studio. Now I'm just going to take Chroma Key Studio and I will drag it and drop it down onto my shot here. And there we go. Now, if you're familiar with BCC and specifically Chroma Key Studio, you'll know that it's a fairly, I'll say it, not a fairly straightforward keyer, but it is a fairly straightforward keyer that you can get in and do some keying with. Now, I've just pulled a very quick key that I want to come in and just see the mat that I've created. And you can see that in this case, let me just switch the quality over to best quality. We've done an okay job of the key here, but it's really going to require a lot of work. And I find that with keying, in a lot of cases, it can be really hit and miss. Just because a lot of the tools, you don't quite understand what they do, and when you start dragging, they're not really giving you the result that you want. And in a lot of cases, we can get some really dirty, messy keys that in a lot of cases, we just hope that the background is going to help cover up the fact that the key is not that great. Well, what I want to do is I want to get in and I want to start really simple. Okay, let's just, I'm just going to move the effects palette up here. And I'm just going to move my bin up here as well. And let me just remove the effect here because I'm not actually even going to use this clip. I'm just going to come to this clip here. Okay. Now this clip is what I like to call the editor's dream. Now I call it the editor's dream for really one main reason, and that is the green in this key is pretty even. Okay. A lot of editors, when they start out doing keying, don't sort of, I don't want to say clue in, but they don't really clue into the fact that we have a bunch of other tools like garbage mats that we can use to get in and make our lives easier. Now, as we go, I'm going to talk about garbage mats, and more specifically, I'm going to talk about Mocha and garbage mats. But in this case, what we're going to do to start out with is let's just call it Primat Studio. And I want to talk a little bit about the interface with Primat Studio. So I'm going to punch in Primat Studio. Now, if anybody jumps in on the chat and asks what version of Media Composer I'm running the most current version, 8.9.2 of Media Composer. I am on a Mac, but everything I'm going to show you works exactly the same on Mac and Windows. So I'm going to take Primat Studio. I'm going to drop it onto the shot of our doctor here. Let me just make my window just a little bit bigger here. I want to make it as big as possible so it's easy for everybody to see. Now, the first thing you're going to notice when I drag Primat Studio onto our shot is we have this little UI that's appeared over top of our footage. Now, let me actually just undo what I did right there. Okay. And I'm just going to grab the UI and just drag it wherever we need it to go. So depending on the shot, and in this case, what I'm going to do is just do a very basic, I like to call it a basic garbage mat because we're basically just cropping our image here. Not too much. And this is essentially a garbage mat. Now, I'm just going to make sure that our doctor doesn't step outside that, which I think we're going to be good with. She stepped out just a little bit right there. Perfect. Okay, so this is a pretty good rough garbage mat. And what I'm going to do is you'll notice that as soon as I switched over to the cropping tools that I lost the BCC Primat heads-up display here. So I'm just going to click back on the main standard UI and we're going to get that window back. I'm going to put it over here. And this is one thing right away that's going to change the way that you do keying. You're going to need to do some extra work over here inside the effects editor, but the bulk of the work that you're going to do is right here inside of the UI. And the great thing with the UI is that if you don't need it right now, we can simply just hide it. So you could conceivably stick it in the upper left-hand corner, hide it, and do whatever you need to do, whether you're showing it to a client or anything like that. What you can also do, obviously, is zoom back and just stick that UI outside of the actual frame itself, so it's not actually going to impede on anything that you are doing. Okay, now I'm just going to zoom back in because, to be honest, we're sort of out of the way of our doctor here. And let's get in and do the key. Now, as I just showed you inside of Chroma Key Studio, how I did that was I came over here to the effects editor, I chose the actual key option, I came over here, I selected. You can see we've already done about 3 steps to actually do the key. Inside of PriMatt Studio, that's not going to be your ideal workflow. To be honest, PriMatt Studio is going to do all the work for you. And what do I mean by that? Well, all I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to auto-analyze my footage, and in 2 seconds I have a key. So literally, PriMatt Studio has more or less figured out exactly what it thinks that I'm going to be keying out. Now, there's a few little things that are going on in here that I am going to get in and fix. Now, inside of Chroma Key Studio, probably the workflow you're most accustomed to doing is to switch back and forth between the actual final product, which is what we have here, and the actual Chroma Key matte, which you saw that I did in the first example. Now inside of PriMatt, we can do all that again right here from within the heads-up display. And I'm just going to click on the final matte, and there we go. Now you might be thinking I got to come over here and start dragging faders. We're not actually going to do any of that. And believe it or not, I'm actually not even going to worry about the final matte right now. What I need to see is exactly what's going on with the status of our matte. Now believe it or not, really the final composite and matte status in most cases is what you're going to be utilizing to get the key the way that you want. So I'm going to click on matte status, and what this is showing me is just that, the status of the key that I created. Now what exactly am I seeing here? Well, the way that you need to think of things is white is opaque. So basically anything that's white is, we're not going to be able to see through it, it's going to be completely solid. Gray is semi-opaque, so basically meaning partially transparent, and black means completely opaque. So you can actually see that our key is not as good as I might like to think that it is. So the first thing I need to do is get in and clean this up. Now again, you might be thinking I need sliders. Don't need any of that. You'll notice that the first option that I have selected is to clean the background. Now I could choose to do this as a point or as a rectangle. I'm going to choose rectangle for most of the work that I'm doing, but you'll see when I'm going to get in and use this point tool. So I'm simply going to select the rectangle, and I'm just going to choose part of this area that I know needs to be keyed out. And I'm just going to draw a window around it. And boom, there's my key cleaned up. Now you'll see we got a few little specks in here that I can come in. I'm going to clean it up for the most part, just to sort of get it pretty darn close. Okay. Now you'll see that if I switch back to the final composite, this is going to really be our workflow here. We still got some issues with our hair, not quite the way that we need it to be. Let me come back to the matte status, because with that thought of me cleaning up the background, I can also get in and clean up the foreground. So let's clean that foreground up. Again, I'm going to select a window using the rectangle tool inside of our matte to clean that up. And again, I'm just going to keep windowing this exactly the way that I need to, just to get rid of everything. Now, this here actually represents, as you can see, the pen. Now, I'm going to come back to that in just a second, okay? So, what do we got here? We've got our doctor who's completely opaque. She's exactly the way that we need to. Now, I kind of laugh because if there's one thing that will make an editor bash their head on the table, it's hair or anything that's very thin. Now, if you've been sort of seeing my posts to get people to come and check out the webinar, I've been posting a lot of images of keys. Specifically, I just posted one a little while ago of the detail that you can get out of the hair. Now, let me come back to the matte status for 1 second, because this is, right now, partially opaque. And what I want to do is get in and actually tell PriMatt that this needs to be transparent. Now I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on my doctor here, and I'm going to move over here like such. And we're going to use another tool that's called, appropriately enough, Make Foreground Transparent. Now once I select that, the rectangle tool is kind of a little much. It's like shooting a fly with a cannon in this case. And I'm going to use the point tool. Now, something that I sort of want to bring to your attention, it's something that never really occurred to me when I was talking about, or when I really focused on keying, is that keying is a lot like tracking in Roto. If you've done any Roto work and you had to get in, and let's just say we had to Roto the doctor, okay? Doing a Roto of the entire doctor and having to adjust every keyframe, every frame is a little much. It's a lot easier if you break it down into different parts. And I'm going to show you a different example of PriMatt Studio where I've actually done that. But in this case, I'm just going to be very generic here. And I'm just going to zoom in again. We'll just pan over to her. And with the point tool and the make foreground transparent, what I'm going to do is just draw a little bit in there to make this transparent. And you'll see that as soon as I did that, that green disappeared. Okay. Now if you take a look at the doctor, she's looking pretty good. Now, because she has blonde hair, there is a bit of a reflection of the green on her hair. Now, I could get in and fix that here, but I'm actually going to leave it because as we go, I'm going to show you other tools and other examples that you're going to be like, yes, we can come back and we can now utilize that here in this example, because I don't want to get too caught up on one. I want to show you a wide variety. Now, what I've also done here, I'm just going to step out of the effects editor for 1 second, is I've done a finished version of her as well, where I've gone in and I've added a bit of color to her. You can see we still got a little bit of green in the hair, but again, we're going to talk about getting rid of that when we start talking about inside and outside mattes or masks, okay? But the big thing here is that if I step in and zoom in, take a look at the transparency through her hair, okay? Now, one other thing that I do want to talk about in here that I'd actually, it's funny, I've gone over these so many times that I've actually sort of taught myself different things every time. And that is, I want to talk about edge color correction a little bit. Because as you can see, let me just zoom in again here. Okay. We got a little bit of a green highlight around here. What I'd like to do is just remove some of that color. Because she's wearing this white jacket, I just want to get rid of it a little bit. And to be honest, in the past, I've always found these tools to be very hit and miss, but not so much inside of PriMatt Studio. I'm going to turn the edge color correction on here. Now, I think what I'm going to do here is just check to see what I did with the raw one, because I've already got that one rendered here. Perfect. I've got the same issue here, actually. So let's just zoom in. There you go. You can see it here. Okay. And I'm going to turn the edge color correction on. But the question is that I've done that, but what exactly is the edge? I really don't know what it is that I'm working with. I'll just zoom back a little bit. One thing that's great inside the edge color correction tool is this brightness edge. I'm going to take the brightness edge and just drag it all the way up. And as soon as I do that, you can now see exactly what the edge is around your keyed image. Now, we're obviously not going to be, having our brightness that much, but it does give you a very good representation of exactly what you're going to be adjusting. Okay. And what I'm going to do in this case is I'm just going to bring the edge brightness back to 0. And then I'm just going to back off on the saturation a little bit. And as soon as I do, you'll notice right away, if I take the saturation up on the edge, you can notice it a lot more. But as soon as I start to take it away, it really doesn't do anything to her hair, but it does get rid of a lot of that green that's around her jacket. Now, something that I do want to point out, if I step into the matte status, you'll see the hair is, again, slightly transparent. The pen is a bit of an issue because it's actually the same color as her hair. Now, again, this is something that we'd get in and fix when we're talking about inside masks. So why don't we move on and let's talk about that, okay? So here is the shot that I was sort of teasing. Let me just come to my number 3 raw. Of course, there we go. I want to make sure with the raw one that I remove the effect here. So we start with it actually removed. Now, I picked this shot for a reason. This is a shot comes courtesy of Hollywood Camera Work, and you can actually, if you want to practice along, and I should mention that with BCC 11, you can download a free trial over at borisfx.com. So if you want to follow along with this webinar after the fact, you can download it and you can follow along with this clip. Download it at Hollywood Camera Work, and you can just Google them to find this clip. Now, the issue with this clip is a couple things. One is all of these little strands of hair. Okay. The next issue with this shot is the fact that it is 720p super compressed up converted to 1080p. So at this point, this is where you just sort of say, okay, I'm going to chroma key with my eyes closed because no matter what I do, I'm not going to get a good result. But again, that was the way we used to do things. We don't do it anymore that way. So let's get in and let's do this again. I've still got PriMatt Studio up here, drag and drop. And I'm going to show you actually with this example a common problem that you can run into. I'm just going to zoom back a little bit here. So with our talent, again, you'll see the workflow is exactly the same with every shot that we work on. Let's auto-analyze this shot. Now, you'll notice that we get some color change in her, but don't even worry about that right now. Let's only look at the hair. Okay, look at all this detail that we have in the hair. Let me zoom in. Okay, a little bit more. Okay, individual strands of her hair are all still there. Now, granted, we zoom in, you can see the compression. Okay, but again, much like we had done before, I'm going to take a look at our matte status to see what's going on. You'll see the background's key is not as great as we originally thought it was. So let's clean it up. Okay, let's make sure we're on clean background. Let's clean it up. There we go. And we now need to clean her up. Now, where things get a little bit tricky and you need to pay close attention is that if I switch back to the final composite, these are part of her face. This here is not. Okay, you'll see this here is actually supposed to be transparent. So let me clean the foreground up. Okay, looking good. Let's switch back now to the final composite. Looking good. And this is even looking pretty good right here. Now, if we had a little bit of green in here, what we could do is we could again come right back to our make foreground transparent, choose the point tool, give it a little color, and you can see that right there. Let me just undo what I just did here. Okay, I'll just zoom in a bit. Okay, pan over. You'll see that with the rectangle tool, make foreground transparent, if I color it, whoop, let's make sure we're actually using the point tool, not the rectangle tool. There we go. Okay, you'll see we get a little bit of transparency back. We also have the same problem up here, a little bit of green in here. Let's remove that. Now, here's where things get kind of interesting, and you can get yourself, I sort of like to call it a keen feedback loop if you're not careful. Okay, what happened is that I got the hair the way that I like it. Okay, it looks great. The only problem is that if I come back to the matte status, you'll see definitely not what I want. And then what happens is you're like, oh, no problem. I'll just come back here. I'll clean the foreground up again. And what happens is that when you come back to the final composite, the green's back again. Okay, and it's kind of like a ping pong match. So how do we get around this? Well, this is where we now need to start thinking. I always like to say, like Back to the Future, Marty, you're not thinking fourth dimensionally. We now need to think of the other tools that we have at our disposal. Okay, and the other tools that we have at our disposal is the ability to create what are called inside and outside masks or mats. Now, this is where, you know, the fear is struck into many editors, because not only are we going to be utilizing this new tool that we have, PriMatte Studio, but we're also going to be utilizing a very, very powerful tool that we have at our disposal called Mocha. And a lot of editors shy away from Mocha because it seems very daunting, but in reality, it's not as daunting as you might think. Okay. Actually, when you sit down and look at it, especially when you're getting rolling, you can utilize it just like any masking tool inside of After Effects to do basic masks like I've just done here. Now, what I'm going to do is just remove the effect, and I've actually created an inside garbage matte. Okay, and I'm just going to take that and drag it and drop it onto my shot. Doesn't look like anything's actually happened. Okay, but if I come in and say, show me the inside mask, you'll see that what I've done is I have drawn an area around her. Okay. Now, let me just double check here that with my inside mask, it's of opacity and spill is what we want to have it set as. Okay. And I'm going to come back now to the final composite, and I'm now going to do the exact same task that I just did. I'm going to auto-analyze our footage, but here's the difference. You'll notice her face didn't change color to that weird red color this time. Because if I come back to matte status, what's happening now is that inside mask is now being utilized in conjunction with the matte to give us an almost perfect matte. So if I now come back to the final, actually let's come back to our matte status and do this properly here. I'm going to clean the background up. Okay, looking good. Again, I'm not going to be too specific here. Looking good. And let's now do our little bit of the make transparent with our point tool. Again, in here a little bit. Okay, we can get in, just make sure it's actually doing pretty good. Okay, and what we now have the ability to do is to then take this a little bit further. Okay, let's take a look at the before and after. There's the source, there's the final, almost looking dead on. The only problem is that she's not exactly quite where I need her to be. Okay, I'm just going to zoom back a little bit here. I actually just want to add just a little bit of color, just brighten her up a little bit, add a little bit of color. Many people think we're going to be getting in and adding another effect. Don't have to do that. Okay, we're going to do that right here from within PriMatte Studio itself. And we're going to do it with just a basic color correction adjustment. I'm going to turn color correction down. We're going to give a little bit of brightness, a little bit of contrast, and a little bit of saturation. And now she's looking really good. Now, I'm actually kind of glad that I skipped over something here, because this looks great except for one thing. If I come back to the matte status, you'll see that the matte is not exactly the way that I need it to be, sort of in the shoulder, a little bit in her face. This is where we now need to start thinking a lot smaller than we were thinking before. Okay, I'm going to come to clean foreground, I'm going to come to the final composite, and I'm going to make sure I have the point tool. Because here's where we're now going to get in and just start doing little corrections like that. Okay, We don't need to go big. You'll notice we got a little bit of green back, so let's make some foreground transparency. Get rid of some green in there, okay? And you'll see that this is now looking good. This is now how we can get in and fine-tune mats that we've created, okay? Now, again, stepping back slightly, let's talk a little bit about that inside mask and exactly what I did, because I showed it to you. Here's the inside mask, and it kind of looks like a big blob, but that's okay. The whole point of it is it's really an inside garbage mat, okay? And what we have the ability to do right here is to launch Mocha. Before, this was done with a widget inside a Media Composer, and now we can do it with Mocha. Now you're probably thinking, well, I don't really know tracking very well. It seems a little daunting for me to get started with, and don't worry. One thing I want to point out is that if you are new to BCC, if you're new to Mocha, don't worry. The Boris FX website has tons of great tutorials on getting yourself up and running with Mocha. But if you know anything about masking in general, whether you're coming from a different NLE, whether you're coming from Premiere or an application like that, to get in and to create an inside mask inside of Mocha is actually very simple. What I'm going to do is I'll just delete mine here, okay? Come back to the beginning, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the Bezier spline tool, and I'm just going to draw right around her like this, okay? Nothing fancy, okay? What I want to do is just avoid any of the green. So we'll kind of do it like this. Pretty good. Now, if I was to quit out and say save, that's now my new inside mask. Now, you'll notice I gave it a feather, which is fine. I'll show you that in just a second. But now all I have to do if I step back into Mocha is say, okay, well, we've got a keyframe there. Let's just jump down to here. Oh, okay. Well, she's moved. Well, let's just move the points quickly here. Because to be honest, I could get in and track this, but she really doesn't move very much. A keyframe's already been added. You know, she's pretty much staying in one place, so I'm not going to sweat this too much. Okay, but this is a great way to get in and start to become familiar with Mocha and how you're going to get in and do this. Now, I'm just going to show you briefly my absolute favorite tool inside of Mocha, and it's one of these mind-boggling things. Okay, I'm just going to come down to the end. We'll just do another little adjustment, but I've realized that when I save this, it's a hard edge mask. Now, I do have the ability to feather it from here, but I also have the ability to feather it from inside of Mocha as well. And I love this, and I want to show this to you because how many of you might be, familiar with doing adjustments to keyframes is you have to do them one at a time, which, to be honest, is I'm not going to say infuriating. It's more like pulling all your hair out. Whereas inside of Mocha, we have this fantastic key called the Uber key. Uber key is like the greatest invention of all times, because what I can do is simply select all my points. I can come over here to the edge width and start adjusting it, and you'll see that what this is going to do is create a soft edge mask, okay? But with the Uber key turned on, it's actually going to make that soft edge mask to every keyframe down the timeline, but it's also going to keep any adjustments that I've made, as you can see the mask moving there, to all the keyframes, okay? So this is a really an awesome tool inside of Mocha. I'm just going to save this. Okay, and you'll see that it immediately updates to give you that soft edge right from Mocha. So one thing that you have is plenty of options. Okay, now I'm just going to come back to my finished version of this. Let's just come to finished. And you can actually see that if I step into the effect and we come to the inside mask, we have the inside mask there pretty much the way I'd created it before. Okay. So let's move on now. Let's talk about another important situation. Hair is one. Hair is one that will literally make you pull all your hair out. Okay. The next one that I want to show you is this one. Okay. And this is one that I teased sort of when I was promoting the webinar. Okay. Now we kind of got two killers here. We've got hair and we have the material in the dress. Okay. These two are both keyboard smashing, infuriating, editors when they see people have brought this to them just say, forget it, it's never going to work, okay? But we can actually make it work. I'm just going to come to my raw clip here. Here's my raw. I'm not going to say she's a ballet dancer because I don't think that she is. And let me actually just bring this down a little bit here and just remove some of these tracks because I got a little bit too many tracks here. There we go, okay? Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to create a garbage mat. Now, when I say create, I've actually already made a garbage mat for this. Okay, there we go. Now, what I decided to do with this when I wanted to set the key up was I wanted to pick a point where I had her not necessarily from the side because it doesn't give me a good representation of what's going on with her hair. So I picked this frame, and that's why I put a locator in here. Hair's flapping out, dress is flapping out. It's transparent here. We're going to need to get in. We're going to need to make these adjustments. So this is a good reference frame. I always like to try to find reference frames when we do this type of work. So again, much like every other step of this process, the first step is auto analyze. Okay. Now in this case, we could do an inside and outside matte. Now in this case, what I've done is the opposite of an inside mask. I've done an outside mask. So instead of getting in and worrying about what's going to be completely opaque, all I'm worrying about is getting rid of green on the outside. Let's get rid of that green. Okay. And you'll see in the matte status, it's only looking at what's inside of this outside mask that I've created. Again, to create them exactly the same as what I just showed you for the inside mask. Okay. So again, the funny thing is I sound like a broken record when I'm talking about this. Again, the process is the same. We're just getting in, drawing out what we don't need. Now I'm not going to worry too much about the bottom here. Okay. And I think what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to clean the foreground up a little bit and kind of do this. Okay. Now it gives me some stuff back at the bottom here, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Okay. Let's come back to the final composite. You'll see that we got some green happening here. Okay. So let's get in and let's fix this. So I'm going to come back to my make foreground transparent. We're going to come to the point tool. We'll just sort of color in here a little bit. Looking good. Again, the same there. Now I think what I'm actually going to do here, let me just undo what I just did here, because I think I went a little bit too far when I did this originally. Because you'll notice, let's actually do this. I'm just going to remove the effect altogether, because you'll notice that when I originally created that matte, it was actually looking pretty good. So let's do our auto analyze. It's pretty good. So let's come to our matte rectangle again, area, 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 area. Perfect. Okay. Now you'll see that if I come back to my final composite, this is looking pretty good. Again, we could get in from here, come to our point tool, to our foreground transparency, just do a little bit of coloring just to make it even more transparent. But here's where things get kind of interesting. And this is where I really need to look at the final matte. I'm just going to scroll through, and I want to, perfect, right there. Okay. Because what happens is that in a lot of cases, the key is a little bit too powerful. And it ends up taking out a little bit too much. You'll see that her dress, I'll just zoom in here, is now almost completely transparent, which is really not very realistic. We should still see semi-transparent like this. Now I'm going to switch back to the final matte here. And I'm going to use another great tool that's actually right below the making the foreground transparent. It's kind of, I guess if you want to call it the polar opposite of that, which is if we're making something transparent, the opposite of that is bringing it back. So what I'm going to do with the point tool is just restore some detail like this. Okay. And you'll see that by doing that, what we've now done is given back a little bit to the dress. Now, whether you're doing this on the actual final composite or not, you'll see in a lot of cases we actually don't even, oh, there we go. Okay. You'll see we get a tiny little bit back, but for the most part, she's doing pretty good. Now, this is another concept that's important for me to talk about quickly, and that is don't overkill it on one frame. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that if you overkill it on one frame, you're not thinking of the bigger picture. In a lot of cases when she spins in, you're not even going to notice the fact that there's one frame where part of the dress is completely transparent. So don't get too bogged down with that. Now, I do notice that her leg is slightly transparent. So again, because I don't need to, take out the giant sledgehammer to do this work, I'm going to clean the foreground up with the point tool, and I'm just going to color in a little bit on her leg. Now you'll see, again, that was a little bit too much. So this is where I could get in and fine tune things exactly the way that I need to using our matte status. Okay, I'm just going to undo this here because I want to just show you here. Let me just undo that again here. Okay, I do want to show you how you can then take this and what I'll say, quote unquote, finish it. And again, it's utilizing Primatte Studio. What we're going to do here is I'm going to take the effect and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to put it down onto the layer below. Okay, she comes all the way over. So that little thing, take a look at the transparency in her dress. It's fantastic. Okay, it's to be honest, I've never really seen a keyer that could do this inside a Media Composer as well as Primatte's been able to do it. And it really doesn't take that long to be able to do it. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to step back into effects mode. and I'm going to come down to the drop shadow. Okay, I'm going to turn drop shadow on and make sure we're only viewing that layer, and I'm going to turn the source opacity off completely. I'm going to put the distance at nothing. I'm going to put the intensity up to 100, and I think that's okay. Give it a little bit more softness. Now, again, these are additional tools that we have at our disposal inside of pretty much most of the effects across Boris Continuum Complete, not just specific to PriMatt Studio. I'm going to come in. I'm just going to set my tumble. I think -90 is what I want it to be. Let me just find out where that disappeared to here. There it is. Okay. And there she is there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this layer on, and let's put this where we need it to be, right about there. So this way, when she spins in, she will have her shadow below her. Okay. Now I've, again, much like I've done before, let's come to number 4 here. I've got a finished version of this where she spins in like that, finishes up, and there's her shadow there. Okay. And again, the transparency of the dress, you wouldn't even know when you see her spin in. I'm not even doing this in real time, that there might be a couple frames in there where it's completely transparent. Okay, now again, it's also important to point out, I want to mention that with the last shot and with this shot, these are both shots that come, that's provided to me courtesy of Artbeat, so I want to thank them as I go along because their footage is fantastic. What's important to keep in mind is that with a lot of stock footage, when you go to download it, the quality is photo JPEG, so there is compression in there, and these are the type of keys that we're pulling with photo JPEG compression. You see the hair, the detail in the hair, like you can see right through that hair there if I zoom in here. Take a look at that. You can actually see right through that hair, where in most cases if we were using another keyer, that would be green that we would see in there. Okay. Now let's talk about the last example here. And this was one that I sort of called the big final composite, because we have a few things that we have going on here. We've kind of taken a lot of what we've done and applied it here and then taken that one step further. Okay, so let me show you how we did this shot. This is a good one here. Now, there's another great feature inside PriMatt that I want to show you here as well. Let's switch to our raw shot here. Good. I'm just going to remove that. And let me come, I'm actually going to do it to this here because I want to show this to you. This green screen, or the green background, looks pretty good. Okay, now there'll be situations where inside and outside masks might not help you because maybe the person is zoomed in a lot, or maybe, you know, who knows what the reason might be. So I'm just going to come back to my PriMatt Studio here. Let's make sure we got it here, PriMatt, there we go. And I'm going to apply it to our shot. And I'm just going to do again, do I even need to say it? Auto analyze. Now this looks pretty good, but what I want to show you here is the matte status, and you can actually see what the deal is with the green screen. Now, in many cases, you might want to give yourself a little bit of a push in the right direction if you haven't gone in and done inside and outside masks. What you can do to do that is say, let's adjust the light on our green screen that's right over here inside the effects editor. And as soon as I do that, take a look at how even the green screen is now. It hasn't really made a change to our talent, but it's definitely made a change to that green screen. So we now have a much more even green screen that's going to let us get in and do our work a lot faster in situations where, again, maybe we don't have access to the inside and outside mask for any reason. Like I said, maybe you're zoomed in too far in your footage. But in this case, I've done an inside and outside mask, and I'm going to show you why I did that in just a second here. So let's take our inside-outside mask. You'll see we've, taken it pretty darn close. And you'll see that if I come to my outside mask, it's represented like such. My inside mask, take a look at this. Okay. And I'm going to show you how I did this in just a second here, okay? Let me just come back to my matte status as always, because actually we even need to do the key first. So let's auto-analyze. Looking good. Let's come to our matte status. Again, I'm not even going to say it. Let's clean the background. Okay, looking good. And I believe down here at the bottom, got a little bit of garbage in here. Okay. Okay, now I'm not going to worry about the table, and you'll see why in just a second. Now you'll see we got a few little bits in here that I can get rid of. And let's switch back to the final composite. Now, this was an interesting one that I played around with for a while, because I couldn't quite get it the way that I wanted it. And I'm going to show you what I ended up doing to get it the way that I wanted, because you'll see that I can see the edge of the outside mask. So let's fix that. Again, we're going to come to clean foreground. I'm going to come to the point tool, and I'm just going to start drawing little areas in. Okay, that's looking good. Sort of over here, inside of her ear, Looking good. Now, the only problem is that as soon as I did that, I've introduced this sort of outside line, which many editors are familiar with, and we've seen it a whole bunch of times in the past. Okay, and in a lot of cases, it's just something we would settle for, or what we might even do is we might hide it with a light wrap. Okay, and with the light wrap turned on, you'll see that as soon as I did that, the light wrap came on, and it, for the most part, hid the sort of the bit of a darker edge, which kind of got us what we wanted, except for one little problem. I've lost the detail of her hair here. Now, there's actually something that I did miss here. Okay, it's actually in her ear, so let me make sure I'm cleaning the foreground here. I'll just clean her ear. There we go. Hair's looking okay. There we go, good. Okay, so let me zoom back here. And I was playing around with this for a while until I stumbled on something that didn't even occur to me before. I'm going to head to my matte status. You'll see this tool is the tool that you're going to be going to constantly. Okay. Now, again, I could clean the background up even more like that. But what I want to do is remove that dark edge around her. So how did I do it? Well, if you take a look here, this dark edge looks a lot like this dark edge. So what I did was I said, okay, well, maybe if I come in here, and I'll just zoom in a lot, and I come back to my matte status, I'm going to come to my point tool again, and we're going to clean the background up. And I'm going to clean the background up right here, like that. Okay. Now, as soon as I've done that, what I've actually now done is removed a lot of that edge. If I switch back to the final composite, you'll see that for the most part, that edge is gone. We got a little bit of it up here that I could get in and be even more specific with, but this is now how we can get in and start to fine tune these mattes exactly the way that we need to. Okay, and that looks much better than it did before. That edge was very bright. We could now get in and add just a tiny little bit of light wrap to get this the way that we wanted to, if necessary. But for me, I like the detail in her hair. Now let me talk a little bit about what I did with the inside mask, because that's something that's very important. And it's something that can look quite daunting when I step into Mocha. Now what I'm going to do is just turn everything off here, because this is where you need to start rethinking. You know, as Master Yoda says, we must unlearn what we have learned. And this is where we're going to talk about breaking things down just a little bit. I'm going to talk about this for about a minute or two here. And this is where what I did was that I broke my track down into tracking her body and tracking her head. And then what I did is I attached my rotos to each one of those tracks. So as you can see, I did a track of her body like that. And then what I did was with my right arm, the body, and the left arm, is I actually attached them. I linked them. I didn't track anything. I just linked them to the main body. So this way they're going to move in conjunction with that track that I've already done. And then all I did was make slight modifications to the actual track itself. Let me just zoom in here. And you can see that as I move, that moves as well. And what this is actually doing is it's acting as a mask. So if I select all of these, you can now start to see what's happening with my inside mask. Okay? And all I did for her head was the exact same thing. I tracked her head. Let's turn the head track on. Okay? And then I basically just added the head to the mix. The head mask is attached to the head track, and what you now have is a super ridiculous, complex track made super easy. Okay, I probably did this in maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes. I know you're probably thinking 10 or 15 minutes, but to be honest, if I was to do this the old-fashioned way, that's like an hour's worth of work right there. Okay, so let me just quit out. I'm not going to save anything here. And I want to talk about something else that was happening here, which was really the green reflection on the table, okay, which I really wanted to get rid of. I didn't want that in there. So I figured, well, okay, why don't we just take this a bit of a different way? I'm just going to copy this layer, and I'm going to paste it into the top here, okay, and I'm going to remove the effect. Now, really what I want to do is I just want to pull out all the saturation from this shot. Now, don't worry, we'll talk about the brown in just one second, okay? So what I did was, the first thing, I just pulled all the saturation out by using a hue saturation lightness effect from BCC. And then what I did was I created a matte using the pixel chooser. Okay. Now I'm going to alt drag that or option drag that onto my shot, and I'm just going to isolate it so you can see exactly what I did. You'll see that inside of the pixel chooser with Mocha, this is just a static mask. Doesn't move, doesn't do anything. But what it does do is that I needed to have this cut through so that I could see the brown in the cup. So what I did is inside of Mocha, I just made a little mask right here that is not an additive mask, but a subtract mask to actually cut a hole so it can see through and to keep this color exactly the color of what's behind it. So now what we now have in this case is a key. Now what I'm going to do is just switch over to my final version of this. Okay? That's looking pretty darn good. Okay? The final version that I rendered out, let me just go to the finished version here. There we go. You can see we've lost a lot of that green. We've lost a lot of that edge. This just looks like a shadow in here. We've kept this. The desk is looking good. Everything's looking actually gray the way that it needs to. And we keep the color of our cup. Okay? Okay, now that's really what I wanted to focus on as far as Primat goes. Let's talk about a couple other things, a couple other tools that we now have at our disposal. One is a tool and one is a huge workflow enhancement for Media Composer editors. And I'm just going to close my Primat bin here. Let me just open my, I'm going to open my Justice League tutorial bin. Now this is kind of a little sneak peek of a tutorial that I'm working on. I do want to encourage you that if you do have questions up until this point, head on over and post them in the chat window, because Peter McCauley, who is the Senior Product Manager for Boris Continuum Complete, is again watching, and he's going to answer some of the questions that you have, and hopefully I'll be able to help answer them at the end as well. Okay, so I'm going to call up this shot here, which is a shot that we'd seen before, and it's our doctor. Okay, now again, she's on a green screen, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. And what I've done is I've just done a little bit of a color correction to her to bring her brightness levels way up. And this is a common situation that editors run into, where they maybe have cut an entire show, hour-long show, they've sent it off to the station, it gets rejected because your video levels are too bright. And what ends up happening is that editors do the absolute editor no faux pas, which is to do a clamp to legal. Basically crop everything off at 100 and send it off, where you lose a lot of the detail in the highlights. Well, we have a new tool at our disposal inside of BCC 11 called, appropriately enough, BCC Broadcast Safe. And what I've done is I've included on this shot, I'll just move this over a little bit here. Where are you, widget? There we go, position, perfect, okay? I've included the BCC Video Scope effect just on the screen so that I can see what's happening. And you'll see that inside of the effect itself, let me select the effect, that we can get in and we can choose different broadcast standards from NTSC, PAL, EBU 103 plus PAL. We've got a bunch to choose from, or a custom one, which is what I'm currently working with. You can even get in, choose the color space you're working in, the color range that you're working in. And what we have the ability to do is to get in, and you'll see that we can clip things. Now let me actually just put this back at 100 here, okay? Put that at 100. We can clip things like this. But that's not what we want to do, because you'll see that we start losing all this detail. What we'd rather do, if I undo that, is just pull everything down universally and not lose any of that detail. So again, here's the big difference. Clip, watch her hair. We lose a lot of the detail right in here in the hair, as opposed to bringing everything down. Keep all that detail in her hair, and we can bring it down to whatever level we happen to need it at. So this is a fantastic tool. Again, like I said, if you realize that there's a problem, everything's been shot too bright, you need to get in, just bring everything south a little bit. A fantastic tool that you can drop, in my case, on V2 and get in and make the adjustment. Okay. Now, big workflow enhancement for Media Composer editors. Let's talk about it now. So I kind of teased it when I opened the bin. I am working on a tutorial for the Justice League. It's just more of a Justice League look. And if you're wondering where I got this font from, believe it or not, it's free. You can just go into Google, type in Justice League, and someone's created a Justice League looking font. Okay. Now, here's the workflow enhancement. Previously, if we wanted to stack effects inside of BCC, what we would do is we'd use something called a multi-filtered effect. Now, that was great for BCC effects. We could take them, add a whole bunch of multi-filtered effects. You'd have glows, glints, color adjustments, all that type of stuff. But the problem was that we were just that. We were limited to BCC effects. But as you now know, the BCC, or the Boris family, has gotten larger with the inclusion now of Sapphire into the family. And so the team knows that we're going to want to be working with both these effects packages inside of Media Composer in our timeline. So we want to be able to start swapping in and out effects from different packages and not have to worry about that multi-filtered workflow. So what's the workflow now? Well, let's do this here. I want to add a color, a glow, and then I want to add a color change to that glow to this Justice League text that I've created. Okay, so again, I'm going to head to the effects palette, Command or Control and 8. Let's come to S_glow. Now, what we need to do first before I do anything is that how you're accustomed to working with the multi-filtered effects is that you'd have to come in and turn the multi-filter on. What I want to do here is I don't want to do that because it actually doesn't exist anymore. Okay, what I want to do now is I want to come in and turn the background layer of this effect off. Okay, no background. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to take S_glow, I'm going to Option or Alt drag it onto my shot to add the glow effect. Okay, looking very nice. Now I'm going to use one of my favorite effects, which is BCC Color Balance. Okay, there's BCC Color Balance. Again, Option or Alt drag. Now, you'll notice that as soon as I do that, the glow has disappeared. Now, the glow technically hasn't disappeared. I'm just going to turn that layer off for a second. I actually just have things in the wrong stacking order. I want to have the text, the color balance, and then I want to have the glow. We can actually do that right here from within the effects editor. I can actually grab color balance and drag it south and then put glow, basically put it in between the glow and the extruded text. What I'm now going to do is take this color balance and maybe we'll, make it a little bit blue, a little bit purpley, kind of like that. Okay. What I now, all I basically now have to do is come up to S_glow and say that I want the background layer to be one track below, and you now have not only BCC effects, but Sapphire effects on the same shot in the timeline, easily being able to have multiple effects on one element. Now keep in mind, this is a keyable element, meaning this could be, in this case I'm using BCC 3D extruded text, but this could be a title. This could be a matte key. This could be just a regular clip. This could be, HD, 2K, 4K, doesn't matter. You can now do all of this right from within the Media Composer timeline.